COVID burnout, and not the good kind either. Hello everyone, this is Dr. Chris Martinson here with your update on SARS-CoV-2 for August 25th, 2020. Gonna be kind of a quick one today because, hey, it's summer and I want you to get out there and enjoy this beautiful summer weather while it's still with us. Getting into the news here a little bit and looking at cases. The cases are still climbing in the United States, and we see California, we see Florida, and we see Texas all in the lead heading this way. Other places like New York, like New Jersey, Illinois, and maybe Georgia here. Just, the cases are climbing, but much more mildly. Still, they're climbing. Still, we have infections. Still, there are infections going on, obviously, in the United States and across the world. When we look across the world, what I see here is we see that cases have been trending down slightly. These are new cases, and deaths have been positively trending down. Why? Well, might be that younger people are getting infected. It might be that we're doing more testing, so we're seeing more cases, and that's taking the case to death count down. But certainly, overall deaths are trending down. And I think that's also due to treatments, and we're going to talk about that again here for just a little bit. But first, I found this was really interesting. It's a new feature that showed up on the Worldometer's site there. And what I like about it is that it was showing the anatomy of a pandemic here. So what we're looking at is this scale down here that sort of goes from light tan on through a darker burgundy color. What that's showing, or dark brown, however you're perceiving that. This is showing the number of cases that are in a country ranging from 0 on the left end of the scale there at 1 to millions of cases. And so it's starting here on the 14th of January. Let's look at this and watch how this spread across the world as this goes forward. And this is what we're seeing here, just that's how a pandemic spreads. You see it started in China, came to the United States, it's in Europe, it's in Australia, hits Africa later, interestingly. Really has hit Africa less hard than other places, any other continent out there right now. I don't know exactly why that might be, but that's what we're seeing. So I found that pretty interesting, and just interesting to watch how that all spread. So let me turn that off real quick, and just watch that again real quick. This is how a pandemic spreads. Starts one place, goes to another. Part of the reason that it spread so easily here early on, we're looking at this, we're still in April now in this, is because the time to have stopped international travel would have been back there in the earliest part of January. If we'd done that, I believe that we could have really prevented a lot of this. And the world wasn't ready to shut down air travel, but boy, if we got that now with the overall decline in the world economy and the fear that people have around this particular virus. And we now have confirmed reinfection is now a thing. So we have here Netherlands claiming the first case of COVID-19 reinfection that was confirmed. This just came out on the 25th of August. What was interesting was there was a woman who got the coronavirus infection for the second time roughly 3 months after her first bout with the virus. So that's not a very long time for her immunity to have lasted. And we're wondering if she had any immunity at all. Maybe it just took her 3 months to run into the virus a second time. But it was indeed a different strain. It's a second infection. They did, this is the gold standard. Not only did she test positive originally and test positive a second time, but the viruses in both those cases were sequenced, their genetic structures compared to each other and found to be different. So this can't just have been a reemergence of the one that was in her body already and things like that. So that's the thinking. All right, so she definitely got reinfected, and the patient had mild symptoms that first time around. And they say here, which comports with everything we've been talking about, which is that the more severe the case you have, the more that you're going to have an antibody response. They say because she had mild symptoms, then your body produces fewer antibodies, and the antibodies from the first time did not help enough to prevent the second infection, but also whatever T-cell responses she had, that cellular immunity as opposed to the antibody or humoral immunity, that didn't help either because she got it both times. But they say here, this doctor said these reinfections don't scare her, certainly not in the Dutch case where the patient concerned had a weakened immune system. We don't know what that means. We don't have any more data about this. We don't know any more about the patient. We don't know what a weakened immune system means. So we'll just have to take that at face value. there's nothing here super scary about this at this point in time. We get reinfections, but it will definitely complicate the whole idea of coming up with a vaccine. And as well, we don't know yet. So how do I put this? When you have a low antibody response, you have then, or a low antibody titer, even if you started with high antibodies and they dropped, you have a chance, maybe, possibly, that you would have what's called antibody-dependent enhancement, ADE. We don't know if that's the case. So this woman who got reinfected here had a mild case, very low antibodies. They're conjecturing in the first case, and she got it again. And it was mild on both cases. All right? So that doesn't tell us much yet, but there was a first COVID-19 reinfection documented in Hong Kong, researchers say. So you can see these guys came out on August 24th, so these are August 25th. So a race to see who could do this first, but researchers in Hong Kong did the same thing. First confirmed case of COVID-19 reinfection, they say, a 33-year-old man, first infected by SARS-CoV-2 in late March, then 4.5 months later, seemingly got the virus again while traveling in Europe. So the case raises questions, obviously, good questions about the durability of immune protection from the coronavirus. But it was also met with caution by other scientists who questioned the extent to which the case pointed to broader concerns about reinfection. So we have just isolated cases here at this point in time. As well, there have been these scattered reports of COVID-19 reinfection, but in this case, they gave us a little more data here. They say the researchers here, they sequenced the virus from the patient's two infections, found they didn't match, great, indicating a second infection was not tied to the first, and there was a difference of 24 nucleotides, the letters that make up the virus's RNA, between the two infections. So 24 full nucleotide substitutions where there was one, now there's a different one in that spot. So that's pretty strong evidence right there that reinfection is a thing. I wouldn't suspect that 24 nucleotides swapping out is enough to make this enough of a strain that the body's immune response could recognize strain A, but didn't recognize strain B because it was just too different. 24 nucleotides out of 29,600 and change. That's not enough. It doesn't feel like. Maybe those nucleotide changes were in really critical parts. It's always possible, but it doesn't. Statistically speaking, it doesn't seem all that important. And by the way, in this particular case, the punchline was all the way at the bottom. Last sentence says, during his second infection, the man did not have any symptoms. So he was caught returning to the this virus was detected when he was returning to the country and had a standard swab. And that swab detected COVID. And then they were intrigued because they followed his case report and said, second time. And so they sequenced the whole thing out. But didn't know, totally asymptomatic. So make of that what you will. Looks like, to me, at any rate, what we're seeing in these second infections that have been documented here, kind of mild. So at any rate, make of that what you will. Just kind of important information, and it's going to potentially complicate what we're going to be able to expect from a vaccine, particularly if, for whatever reason, the body through time and evolution has decided don't keep a persistent immunity response against coronaviruses. That's not the right way to handle this. So that might be the way the body's sort of decided to go forward, which means any vaccine we give, the body will sort of shed that over time. Maybe. We'll see. All right, back to school edition. We got COVID burnout. We got University of Miami reported nearly 100 positive COVID tests in a single week period. The University of Chapel Hill reported that 31.3% of students who were tested had COVID when they were tested. There are probably more. So lots and lots of people coming back and getting COVID. And it turns out the students, who knew, are young and reckless. And so there's a lot of parties going on and lack of social distancing and all that. I'm chalking that up to COVID burnout. People are just tired and said, that's enough. And we see COVID burnout. Here's the international edition. There were 76 guests infected with COVID-19 at a French wedding. And that was kind of interesting. It says, this is despite the fact that organizers and officials say the event was in accordance with safety measures. Although it has to be pointed out, there wasn't a mandatory mask requirement in place at the time of this particular wedding. It took, there is one there now, but it took a hold later. But out of 250 guests, though, right, 76 got infected. Somebody's a super spreader in that crowd. I think you got to talk to Aunt Nancy or Uncle Bob. Somebody out there is just too good at what they do. So you had a super spreader, very unfortunate, because that's a very high infection ratio, I would think, right there. As well, even in India, not young or old, irresponsible people are driving the COVID-19 pandemic in India. So that they're starting to notice that it's the behaviors of people who won't take this seriously, won't wear masks, don't practice social distancing. Those are your super spreaders. Those are the people who are really driving the pandemic at this point in time. All right, let's call that COVID burnout. People just either can't be bothered or tired of this. They want to move on and they want to look past it. But I need to remind everybody that for a significant number of people who get this illness, it turns into either a very life-threatening or a very long-lasting, very dread disease at this point in time. You still don't want to get it. Fight the burnout, people, please. All right, now I want to turn here to, let me see, I got to get this ping here. Yeah, so this is kind of interesting here. We have hydroxychloroquine in Australia. Listen to this gentleman here. Oh, hold on. There we go. Got it. Okay, let's.
On the drug hydroxychloroquine. And it's not about whether my opinion thinks the drug is effective or not, Deputy Speaker. It's about whether the big hand of government has the right to interfere in the doctor-patient relationship and to say to the doctor that you cannot prescribe this drug to your patient if you think not only it would help them, but it may save their life. That's what we're currently doing in Australia. At the state level, we have state governments that are putting rulings in that are actually making a doctor liable to go to prison if he prescribes hydroxychloroquine to one of his patients if he thinks it may save their life. Now, what's this based on, Deputy Speaker? Well, it's based on the findings of our National COVID-19 Clinical Evidence Task Force. And their recommendations are, and I quote, based on the available evidence, hydroxychloroquine is potentially harmful and no more effective than standard care in treating patients with COVID-19. We therefore recommend that hydroxychloroquine should not be used. So, Deputy Speaker, how did they come to that recommendation? Well, that goes on. Evidence informing this recommendation comes from 9 randomised trials that compared hydroxychloroquine plus standard care to standard care alone. But, Deputy Speaker, when you go and you look at those 9 trials that they looked at, not one of them looks at the way hydroxychloroquine, or the doctors that advocate for this drug, say it should be used. The doctors say it should be used with zinc and also an antibiotic such as azithromycin, Deputy Speaker. Difficult word to say for non-medical people. That is how they advocate it for. And also that it must be prescribed and taken in the first 5 days after someone becomes infected. But, Deputy Speaker, none of those 9 trials that this evidence task force looked at actually looked at the drug.
About that, right? Think about that. So it's now down to a non-medical parliamentarian person to have to advocate for what is very simple, very, very obvious stuff, which is that if you're going to use an antiviral, it has to be given early. And as well, we know that it's in combination with other compounds such as azithromycin and zinc, that it's really actually fully effective. And you have a clinical task force looking at the data and finding 9 so-called randomized trials, none of which actually looked at any of that, right? Most of them, out of those 9, almost all of those were given very, very late when nothing could actually be shown to work. So this is just absolutely appalling at this point in time. And the second thing is they skipped right over. They said, well, we think, that hydroxychloroquine, it could be dangerous, and it doesn't seem to be any better than standard of care. Well, it would have to be fairly dangerous in that case, you would think, but they skip over that part because nobody has any data right now that says, here's how it's dangerous, here's how dangerous it is, here's what the hazard ratio is if you were going to take hydroxychloroquine, 1 in 1,000 is going to die if they take it, or something like that. We don't have that data. All right. So consider that, all of that, and then let's wander over here to, and by the way, good job by that gentleman pointing out the very obvious things, which are the data that they're using is not even data that's relevant for assessing whether hydroxychloroquine works or not. Meanwhile, and by the way, hat tip here to Dylan Schickel here there. Thank you very much for putting that on my Twitter feed. And as well, hat tip here to Fat Angry White Man here for HCQ. In Belgium, there was a study that comes out looking at low-dose hydroxychloroquine therapy and mortality in hospitalized patients. Nationwide, this is an observational study of 8,075 participants. Again, not a randomized controlled trial. Don't have one of those yet that we can really count on here, where it's given early and in combination. And again, this is just hydroxychloroquine. Again, it's missing all the azithromycin and zinc and stuff like that. But even that alone, what do we see? Here they conducted a retrospective analysis of in-hospital mortality in the Belgian national COVID-19 hospital surveillance data. Patients treated either with HCQ alone and supportive care, so that's the HCQ group, were compared to patients treated with supportive care only, the no HCQ group, using a competing risk proportional hazards regression with discharge alive as competing risk, adjusted for demographic and clinical features with robust standard errors. So pretty good stuff, very well powered because it has so many thousands of patients. It's probably got a pretty decent signal that they could pull out of there. All right, of these 8,075 patients with complete discharge data on the 24th of May and diagnosed before the 1st of May, 4,542 received HCQ in monotherapy and 3,533 were in the no HCQ group. Death was reported in 804 out of those 4,542, so that's 17.7%. And it was reported in 957 out of 3,533, so that's 27.1%, respectively. All right, 17% death compared to 27% death. First off, looking at that, seeing the 17% death, I can tell you, and even the 27% death, oh my gosh, these are very sick people who were in this particular trial. So even here, where HCQ is given early in this whole thing, this is back in, back in May and all of that. So this is probably before we understood things like dexamethasone and heparin and things like that. All right. But even with that, just giving HCQ alone to very sick people, they found, look at that huge reduction, 17.7% compared to 27% deaths. I mean, come on, hospital and clinical review groups. If you told me, Chris, you have either a 27% chance of death or would you prefer the 17% chance of death? I don't like either of them, but I'll take the 17 because that's me, and I would like my doctor to be able to make that choice with me to this gentleman's point, obviously. All right. So check this out. The mortality was lower in the HCQ group compared to the no HCQ group, right? The adjusted hazard ratio was 0.684. Let me duck down here and get you a definition. Hazard ratio is the ratio, and when HR equals 0.5 at any particular time, half as many patients in the treatment group are experiencing an event compared to the control group. If the HR is 2, any particular time, twice as many patients in the treatment group are experiencing an event compared to the control group. This means that 68% of people were experiencing death compared to the people in the control group who did not get hydroxychloroquine. That's a big deal. It cuts your death really, really low. And by the way, this should be giant news. And if there was any other compound, particularly if it cost thousands of dollars and just came from some big pharma company, this would be news that would be trumpeted over and over and over again. But again, no zinc, no azithromycin. As well, I would really love to see all of this compared to the triple combo therapy out of the Australian doctor who was talking about ivermectin plus zinc plus doxycycline. I'm really excited by that combo right there as well. The data just looks fantastic off of that. So here we are where people are having to advocate very strongly, worrying about doctors being put in jail for daring to prescribe something that has a very strong outcome of preventing death and leading to a much better outcome for the patient, even if they don't die, presumably. We'll have to see how that goes. But remember, all the way from April 27th, when I posted this, to what do we want in a hydroxychloroquine study? What do we want? Randomized. Yeah, full stop. Let's have one of those. The treatments begun early, as soon as COVID diagnosis or upon the appearance of suggestive symptoms. Hey, if it comes back as a negative test later, fine, exclude that person. Doses recorded, as well as dosing frequency, because one of those RCT trials, they kind of forgot to record the doses. That was the VA study, remember? Oh, that was awful. That one might not have been randomized control trial, but it was awful. Zinc included, of course, and blood levels tracked. Wouldn't that be nice to know? What's the blood level of zinc? That would be maybe useful information. Pretty awesome. And then azithromycin, I said way back in April, I said, hey, plus minus. I wasn't sure if it was how big a thing it was. Now I would say, no, include it. Definitely include it. Now it's a definite. Let's absolutely include it. Okay, for sure. Now, why is it that so many people, so many doctors, so many clinicians are really having trouble understanding this kind of data? I mean, they just must look at this and just bounces off of their frontal cortex. They're like, nah, I don't like that study because it wasn't randomized. Even with this amazing and very powerful hazard reduction right here in death. And by the way, very statistically significant. So at any rate, why is it that so many people are having trouble with that? I think it's because of this. Upton Sinclair, it's difficult to get a man to understand something when his job depends on not understanding it. That's what a lot of that's going on right here. It's really that disgusting and grubby, I think. So with that, let's remind everybody about the Commonsense Approach, right? Which is just everybody just take vitamin D, eat well, sleep enough, avoid stress, do all of that. This is critical stuff right here. If you prepare your terrain, you are going to be in much better shape if or when you do get SARS-CoV-2 or any other virus or bacteria. Everybody wears a mask, number 2 here, and you practice social distancing. And why do we wear a mask? Very simply because you want to lower the viral load that you get or that you transmit to somebody else. A lower starting inoculum, a lower viral dose gives you a much better chance of having a mild or even asymptomatic outcome for that particular disease. Why? Because your body has a chance to fight this thing as it's ramping up. You start with a high load, and boom, your body gets overwhelmed. Your defenses get, just overrun before you have a chance to mount a proper defense. All right. If your exposure or illness is suspected and caught early, hydroxychloroquine and or ivermectin. I would say it's an and personally at this point because they both can be given to, they're pretty safe drugs and they don't have any cross reactivity. So why not both? Within 2 days of symptom onset whenever possible. Absolutely. All right, if symptoms progress anyway, then the Math Plus protocol, that seems like the best one to me. And then we go to advanced therapeutic support if all that fails. Hey, maybe later a vaccine comes along, but we don't have to wait and hope. We can get back to work. We can open things up again if we follow these steps. That seems easily done at this point. All right. With all that, conclusions for today, reinfection. Hey, it's definitely a thing. We just don't know how much of a thing at this stage. Hydroxychloroquine, it provides lots of benefits in observational study after observational study. We see that all the time. We just don't have a proper RCT, randomized controlled trial, done yet. And we have to ask, why? It's August 25th. Why don't we have one already? This is crazy. But by the way, lots of countries aren't waiting around for Western countries, for Australia, for the United States to sort of figure all this out. Bangladesh and India and lots of places in South America are just, in Central America, are just forging ahead with things that work. They're experiencing much, much better death outcomes and lower ones than other countries. All right. All that said, we're kind of at the COVID burnout phase of all this. Certainly here in the United States, it seems people are just tired of this. They can't do this anymore. They're just throwing their hands in the air, getting on with life. Infections be damned. You got to watch out for that because even though we've got these better treatments at this point in time, not everybody has access to them for starters. You may live in a country, county, state where hydroxychloroquine is banned, where maybe your doctor could go to jail for prescribing it. Maybe you don't have access to that, which means you're just going to have to sort of, mercy to the winds, roll the dice, hope for the best, and that's going to be your experience with the disease. I think there's a common sense way through all of this, but it seems almost hopeless to expect any such thing to emerge at this stage. This seems pretty easy. Like number one, everybody prepares a terrain by taking vitamin D, eating well, sleeping enough, all that stuff, right? In fact, people take this full set of vitamins and supplements and things like that, right? Quercetin, because it's an ionophore, it allows the zinc to get into your cells where they can do awesome things fighting viruses. That's what the data says. D3, very, very strong correlation between people's disease severity and their D3 levels. Namely, the lower your D3 circulating, your lower vitamin D circulating in your blood, the worse the disease outcome you're going to have. All right. And then if you do get sick, a little elderberry syrup, 3 shots a day. I like this Gobble Mountain stuff here. It's awesome. Organic, all that. Make sure you've got selenium, anything else you might be low in, vitamin C, and acetylcysteine if you get sick. Great things to mop up the antioxidants. All of these have documented science behind them to say they work. So great. We could do that. So back to this question. Why isn't the leaders of the CDC, Dr. Fauci, in other countries, their equivalent CDC and national health bodies, why are they not talking about step number 1 all the time? Why isn't, if your government's going to do something at all, instead of sending tear gas and riot shields to the police departments, what if they sent a little terrain boosting kit to every person? That would be amazing. That would be awesome. That would show that they actually cared about people, and that would be a very compassionate and life-affirming thing to do. Got to ask, why isn't it happening, right? Because this is the simplest, easiest, cheapest thing we could do is make sure people's immune systems are tuned up, right? If you're deficient in vitamin D, it's a bad thing when it comes to getting this particular disease, but also some other ones, right? All right. All of that said, I think because of this, we're going to have to, it's time for a movement of some kind. It's a resilience movement. That's what I've been working on for over a decade now with my co-partner in crime, Adam Taggart at Peak Prosperity. And what we're really after is resilience. Resilience in our bodies, but also resilience in our lives. To be resilient is a very important thing at this particular stage of history because so much is uncertain and so much is about to change and so much is going to change, some for the better, some of it not for the better. So being resilient's awesome. If you get a t-shirt and you send a pic to this address here, info@peakprosperity.com, we will post it to our Instagram page here at instagram.com/peakprosperity. All right, and lots of people have sent these in, so thank you very much for everybody who sent your pictures, and I love it. I love seeing all the greenery, all the smiles, all the wonderful people out there who are part of this movement, I guess, whatever we call it. All right, remember, time to harvest your garden. We're certainly in full harvest swing here at here in Western Massachusetts. And as well, remember to resubscribe if necessary. People get unsubscribed from this channel all the time. And if you like this, if you found that you learned something, maybe you learned something about hazard ratios or you learned something that was useful, hit the like button. That tells us you liked it, and it also helps the Google/YouTube algorithms send it to more people, which helps other people find it as well. All right. Have a great weekend, everybody, and we'll be back on... Oh, it's Tuesday. I'll see you on Thursday. Bye, everyone.
Hi, folks. This is Adam Taggart, Chris's co-founder at Peak Prosperity. To get your own Resilient shirt, simply go to peakprosperity.com/shirts. Each shirt is made of 100% organic cotton and produced in the USA. And when your shirt arrives, please send us a photo of you wearing it if you feel comfortable doing so. We'll add you to our wall of proud Peak Prosperity members who are showing the world that resilience is the way to a better future. Thanks for watching.